Welcome everyone to Already Cancelled. I am Peter, that is Tara. We talk about TV shows here. The year is 2022 and the name of the show is Babylon 5. So this is season 4, episode 18. It is called Intersections in Real Time. So full spoilers for the episode, as always. Just some interesting things before we get into this week's episode. I had some comments on the last episode because it just went public. Informed us that the last episode, you know, give or take, would have been kind of where season 4 originally would have ended had it sort of stuck to its original planned pacing and format.
Would have been quite the cliffhanger.
It would have been a downer of an ending for sure. We'd all left season 4 miserable, but that's good to. It's interesting to know that actually, and sort of see, you know, where things have been condensed a little bit and whatnot. So. This is an interesting episode though. This would have been a hell of a downer episode to start season 5 on as well, since we're on the subject. This is a bottle episode. It takes place basically entirely in an interrogation room. This is Sheridan, who is now in a prison, and it's, you know, other than a couple of small non-speaking roles effectively and like one sort of notable cameo, it's basically just Sheridan and the interrogator for the entire episode in a room. And there's not little else to see or do, and that's not a complaint. It's just that is what this is. It's a very stylistic episode that is chosen to focus on one thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, even when you look at like IMDb, all the cast are like in credits only.
Yeah, archive footage, because there's a little.
There's some flashbacks.
Yeah, I mean it's basically just at the start of the episode when Sheridan's kind of like waking up and he's on the floor and he's looking all disheveled. There's like flashbacks to like when Garibaldi turned on him, and just like it's like he's thinking about that moment in his mind over and over again. And Ivanova's saying, "I don't like it. It sounds like a trap." And he's like, "No, Garibaldi's never given me a reason not to trust him." And yeah, so that sort of played on his head. But did you recognize the interrogator? Well, actually, when he first walked in at a distance, I thought it was Richard Jenkins, and then obviously when I saw him close up, I was like, "Oh, it's not him. It's not him."
I did not.
But yeah. I didn't recognize him either, but when I looked him up, he's Pap Schmear in the Naked Gun movies, and now I can see it.
Well, you just watched all those episodes or all those movies.
I did. I watched them last month, so they're fairly fresh in my head. So when I saw he's in Naked Gun, I was like, Pap Schmear? Oh yeah, he's like the villain henchman in both the first and second movies, even though the main villain's different. It's like he just got hired by the new villain to be the new second in command to him. So. So that's a fun little I don't know, bit of trivia. Enjoy it, everyone. You're welcome.
Who was the villain in the second one? I'll know it as soon as you say it.
Robert Goulet.
Okay. Obviously, I remember Ricardo Montalban.
For the first one, yes. And the third one is your man from Tremors, who's not Kevin Bacon, the other one.
Oh yeah, my man from Tremors.
I like your man. That's just a phrase. It's just a figure of speech.
Oh.
Fred Ward. Is that his name?
Fred Ward.
That's the one.
Really? Gosh, I don't remember.
Yeah, it's like him and Anna Nicole Smith, and then whoever his mother is.
I remember her being in it. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, a lot of jokes. But hey, so this, you know, it breaks down into kind of like 3 or 4 segments this episode, but by and large, it's a lot of prolonged scenes. It's a lot of trying to break Sheridan down. Slowly over the course of the episode, it's like, okay, what is the goal here beyond just interrogating him? And there is a goal. There is like an end goal they have in mind. They want him to do something, and that's slowly kind of revealed throughout the episode. And there's these little tactics. I think you're constantly questioning, or not even questioning, you're constantly just assuming or suspecting that everything the interrogator does, no matter how minimal it is part of his tactics, and there's no like real humanity moment slipping through. Like he's choosing to casually mention that, or casually drop that reference, or so on and so on. So
yeah, this has all been practiced before many times. This is a routine he knows.
Oh yeah, he seems like a pro. It seems like he's been doing this for years. He's got a specific system, and this is what he sticks to. So I guess the first real segment, other than the introduction of like, you know, do you have any heart conditions, are you taking any medication, all that stuff, is, I'd say that's the introduction, but the first real segment would be the corned beef sandwich. I'll refer this first chunk as a corned beef sandwich chunk.
Right.
And obviously he's like sort of teasing Sheridan because Sheridan's not had any food in a couple of days, and he's sort of like, it's intentional, and you know. And to be fair, Boxlighter, like, he's acting here, like the way he's looking down at that sandwich, like he's like, like he's like licking his lips, and it's the first time he's seen food in days, like he's starving.
It's not even just like, you know, here's a plate of potatoes or bread and water. You know, it's like something with a lot of flavor, something that probably has an odor when he's around it. Yeah,
because he's like talking about how it's the perfect corned beef sandwich with the right amount of mustard that he likes, not the yellow kind, the brown with the seeds. That
spicy brown mustard. Yeah.
But anyway, he's tempting him with this sandwich, and you know, Sheridan hesitates a little bit before he takes a bite, because eventually he does give him it, but of course he's making a point when he gives him it. It's not just, and what have we been talking about for half this season at least, with the themes of this season, which is the truth and then perception. You know, what is the story and what is the actual truth? And that theme was like laid on thick throughout this episode. So much of it was about the truth not mattering. It's actually what the image that can be sold, which is what the higher ups want to do. But even this with the sandwich, he's trying to make this dramatic point. He's like, well, I've been saying good morning, and then you questioned if it was morning because of the light coming from outside. But then of course he presses a couple of buttons and it's like, oh no, I'm controlling the lights. Like, you have no idea what time of day it is outside. And you thought it was it was morning, but this is not a breakfast. This is far too heavy for breakfast. This is a lunch. So is it lunchtime? And it's basically the idea that Sheridan can accept the falsehood to solve a problem, which is, so he's trying to kind of make a point for his end goal, which is to get Sheridan to agree to a lot of other falsehoods. But even just in the themes of the season, like, we've been talking about like everything about the propaganda and so many of the characters facing this dilemma of the truth versus the actual image that's out there for everyone. And even Garibaldi's story has very much been that. There's the truth of what's actually happening to him, but then what it's going to look like to everyone else. So I was feeling that throughout this a lot.
Yeah, I mean, this is maybe the first moment that the interrogator brings it up that, you know, what he says is true. Like, well, he's never lied to him, and he said, I've you know, basically no reason to lie to you. Like, do you accept that what I say is the truth? And, you know, obviously Sheridan doesn't really believe him. He has a hunch that it's not actually morning or it's not actually lunchtime, but is willing to go along with it to get the sandwich for the short-term gain, which is the first window, I suppose, for the interrogator to, you know, seize upon and start breaking him down even more to accept more truths that he says is true.
Yeah, it's just kind of, he's making a point, and then he sort of like belabors that with other little things by asking various questions, going into some of his history. One of the first things in this early part of the episode, and a lot of this because it is all set in one room and it's all one I mean, obviously there's breaks in the conversation where he leaves and comes back, but for the most part it kind of blurs together a little bit. So if I'm mixing up two parts, forgive me. But like, one of the things early on as well is you were never political. That's quite interesting. You're on record as not really being political, yet all of a sudden you're trying to overthrow Earth's government. That's a bit strange. Does that mean you've been influenced by outside forces? And Sheridan's like, no. And he's like, well, that's very interesting, because we can all be influenced. We're always influenced by something. And there's a lot of spinning going on here and manipulating what Sheridan said back to him.
I mean, could he have been influenced by inside sources? Or just because of the whole, you know, President Clark... it was a nice reminder that President Clark like kind of had a hand on Sheridan being put in charge of Babylon 5, because he wasn't political and he was this war hero against the Minbari, and it was just for optics' sake, you know.
Well, that's actually one of the interesting things that really comes into it later when he's talking to him about, you know, giving in and doing stuff. But one of the things when he gets really close to him later in the episode, he talks about that war hero thing. He's like, you know, because you were this guy who took down a Minbari ship, we built propaganda about you. The higher ups, you know, the Earth regime, we turned you into this war hero because of what you did, and gave you credibility because you were a useful tool. And now that credibility is challenging our credibility. I thought that was a really interesting point to bring up, that even the mystique that Sheridan had to a lot of people in the first place was part of that propaganda machine, because it was convenient for the Earth government at the time to have this hero to say, hey, look at this great guy we've got who's off fighting the war for us, and he's done this great job. And all of a sudden, though, people will take him a bit more seriously than a lot of other people. So it's this almost partially their own dilemma. And again, that's to say that wasn't true in a lot of ways, but it has created this conundrum for them. I thought that was a really interesting comparison to bring up.
Right, and why they need Sheridan specifically to, go on in front of a camera and like read the things that they need him to read is because he's, they accidentally created this this person that turned against them. Like, because they gave him so much credibility through their propaganda, now they have to like use him. They can't just fake it because people might believe Sheridan.
Yeah, it's because obviously there's a big thing towards the end where, like, if he's too much of a problem to deal with and break, they'll eventually accept that they'll just have to doctor it, but they can't do it in front of people then. And therefore there'll always be a little bit of doubt that it's fake, that that it's not really him that wrote these words, it's not really him that said these things. But they want to break him. He even points out that he needs to believe it as well in case he's scanned by a telepath. But by doing it in front of a crowd of people, there's no doubt that it's him saying it, and they want to discredit, because they want to, like, hey, if Sheridan's saying now that he believes he was influenced by aliens to do all this, then maybe the people who are doing it in his place now might second guess their commitment, they might second guess their determination to go through with it, because their leader is now saying, oh, this was a mistake, I was pushed into this by so and so on, and whatever. It's funny because obviously, like, the propaganda we saw in the TV thing from earlier in the season, that was very much this ridiculous, silly, like, falsehood, whereas I felt like what this interrogator was pushing him for here was a lot more kind of like grounded in that, no, this is just him being influenced by others. It's not about him trying to, like, form some sort of superior human Minbari alliance that's going to, like, replace all the humans or something stupid like that. It was a bit more, okay, that was the silly glamorized thing. We're going to try and make this as believable as possible. This is straightforward. This is something that people might be able to swallow. I thought this was all interesting because it was kind of like, in some ways it was examining some of Sheridan's choices up until this point. And like, okay, is he influenced by these things and these other people? And yeah, of course he's influenced by others, but like, that doesn't necessarily mean it's bad. It doesn't necessarily mean he's being coerced into anything. Just because he's experiencing things from other people and that's, like, informing his opinion, that's just normal. That's life.
Well, sure. I suppose when you phrase it like that, it definitely sounds a bit more sinister when it comes from this interrogator who is just literally torturing somebody until he believes whatever truth the interrogator says he needs to believe.
Yeah, obviously with any story like this, like, part of the main character's thing is winning is just simply not giving in. It's being true to what is actually true and what he believes to be true versus what the interrogators tell him. So it's even the speech he gives to the Drazi. There's a whole sequence where they bring in a Drazi who he's never met before. This is just a random Drazi. And the Drazi starts confessing on tape that he influenced Sheridan, that he coerced them into things. And Sheridan gives him this big speech to talk him out of it and says, no, you win by never giving in. You win by never saying yes. You just keep saying no. And as long as you can say no more than they can ask the question, you win. And of course, Sheridan sort of shows that throughout the episode and right up to, even when he's tempted, there's a great moment where he's like, the interrogator's making his big final appeal, and he sees Delenn standing behind him, and it's like, you get to go home. If you do this, you get to go home. And he is very honest about things. He says to him, look, yeah, one day they'll come for you. One day when you won't be a martyr anymore, when everyone's forgotten who you are in, 15 years, yeah, they'll come and kill you then. But until then, you get to live a free life.
I mean, Sheridan already has a mark on his life for, like, in 20 years, doesn't he? By being resurrected.
I think that's an interesting comparison, actually, because he made that choice somewhat willingly. Obviously, when he jumped, he didn't know he was going to make that deal afterwards. But he made a sacrifice because he believed it was the right thing to do. And now he's been told by the schemy government guy, make a similar sacrifice in the sense that you're going to have a limited amount of time left, but it'll be a decent number of years because they'll need you to be forgotten, but from the public perspective,
right?
But it's a similar thing.
But this guy doesn't know that he already has like an expiration date.
Of course.
For his life. So that is a little bit more of a moment for Sheridan to have kind of up on him. Like, well, I mean, if you know you're gonna die like in a few days or something, and someone wants you to I don't know, do something for them. Like, well, whatever. Like, I'm gonna die anyway in that amount of time.
Yeah, I'll help you move next week. Wink, wink. I mean, no, that's a fair point. I think thematically, though, the comparison between the villain offering a similar kind of deal and Sheridan, like, is already made, not the exact same thing, but it's like, yeah, he's got 20 years left to live, and this might also be 20 years. Let's just say, for example, this is exactly 20 years. It's the exact same as the other deal. It's just that... yeah, it's an interesting point of comparison for me that both sides have in some way offered a similar kind of thing.
Right.
Very different context, of course, but that did strike a thought in my brain when he said that.
Yeah, I mean the Drazi scene was good. I think the actor was actually the same guy who played the alien that resurrected Sheridan from the Fall.
Oh yeah.
Because I saw his name, Wayne Alexander, when it popped up on there. I'm like, oh, but it said Drazi. Well, whatever. He's under makeup. It's fine.
I wonder if that's an intentional thing, though, given the themes of this episode, given the deals he made with them, and obviously at the end of the episode when he's put into a new room, he thinks he's going to get taken away to be electrocuted and killed or whatever. But he's actually just thrown in an identical room. He's got a new interrogator who's starting from scratch, and it's like this never-ending hell kind of thing. There's a reveal where this hooded, almost executioner-looking figure takes off the hood, and it's the Drazi. And it's the idea that the Drazi, he wasn't really someone who was being set up, but he's someone who works for whoever or something like that. But the moment for me, with the keeping in mind it's the same actor, I was kind of thinking, maybe that's the way he looks at him and kind of smirks. I don't know if this is an intentional thing where maybe the idea that Sheridan's seeing a little bit of him in this Drazi is a kind of in the same way that he's seeing Delenn as a temptation. This is a reminder of his goal, his plight, his his mission in life. It could just
be also that they went through so many wards for Shakar because they couldn't stand being in prosthetic makeup. So maybe they're like, well, look, we got a guy. We know he always does well under the makeup. Well, let's just bring him back so we don't have to worry about whether or not they'll work.
From a practical perspective, that might just be the truth, and I'm trying to read some thematic reasoning into it.
Well, I mean, yeah. I mean, you can, though. Well, it doesn't mean it's not there, even if it's unintentional.
I'm not necessarily convinced that in this case. There are times in the past where you've said, oh no, it's just this reason, and I will fight you tooth and nail saying, no, there's an intentional thing here. I'm not sure it is intentional here, and I'm just sort of reaching for something, so I can accept whatever in this case, but it's an interesting catch, though.
Yeah, it's a very good scene, though, with when the Drazi shows up, just because we get, Sheridan's staunchness and his not giving in, and we assume that this torture / interrogation tactic has worked on people who are just as strong as Sheridan before, and they can break. But at least from this point, we see what his intentions are throughout this whole thing. If you are just going to torture him over and over again, why not just wait for death? That at that point, I guess that's why torture doesn't really work. Either you get something untruthful out of them, or you get people who are just waiting for death. Death would be a relief.
Yeah, I actually think that scene with the Drazi also is one. I think it's them testing to see if he's remotely broken, because what they actually witness in that scene is that Sheridan is still Sheridan and is. I mean, obviously, by the end we realize that this Drazi isn't necessarily he was kind of acting or whatever, but
Yeah, it's another way to be like, see, the truth isn't what you think it is.
Oh, sure, but no. But what I was going to say though is that this is Sheridan showing that he's still inspiring. He's still trying to convince people of doing the right thing, which is exactly what the G-men don't want. They want him to be broken down, but here he is after days of torture and deprivation of sleep, food, whatever, and he is still trying to convince this person to do the right thing, and that this is how you show strength. That he's still Sheridan at heart. So it's a really good moment of that as well, just to see him make this. It's kind of a Picard-esque moment and a speech, if you will. Yeah,
it's funny you say that. There is a two-parter episode of Next Generation that I couldn't help but think about.
How is it, despite the fact that I'm already on season 6, somehow I always seem to mention something that makes you think of an episode that I've not gotten to yet?
Yeah, I'm sure most people know it's the Four Lights episode, so just... I mean, it's got to be coming up soon for you. I'm not sure what season it is. Season 7 has a lot of duds, so it's probably 6.
Okay. Well, get into it soon, but but no, I did like that. It's I think it's obviously Boxleiter gets to act a lot in this episode. There wasn't a ton of him last time. Obviously, he got his arrest scene, if you will, but other than that, there wasn't a lot of performing for him, right? Because it was more of a Garibaldi episode. This was very much him and his will and his spirit and all those things.
He's great in it too.
Oh yeah, he's great. And I thought the interrogator, he was great too. I thought he.
Yeah, there's one bit of acting moment where I was just like, oh, they wrote that and they couldn't wait to act that. Where he was just like, you don't have the right. No, you don't have the right. It was just a moment of big acting. Everybody was really excited for it.
it's when he yells, "Yeah, this is not justice. There's no courts. There's no tribunals. You don't have rights here." That's that speech. Yeah. No, it's a good moment though. I think what I like about him is that while I do think that everything he's doing is very calculated, I do love his very I don't care what happens to you. I'm here to get a result, and anything beyond that, I'm not here to be cruel. I'm not here to be kind. It was very reserved. I kind of appreciated that.
Yeah, I don't know why he kind of reminded me of maybe a character like Harvey Keitel plays or something. Like just somebody who's able to separate empathy just for a moment of being good at his job.
Because there's the one moment where you think, oh, is he doing a nice thing because he's passing on a message about his father? Because he says, oh, your father's been held in another place a few miles from here. And when I was picking up some files about you, I ran into them, and he asked me to, send his regards. And because it didn't, go against any of my orders, I was, I'll do it. I'm fine with doing that. But of course, it's a tactic because he immediately follows it up with, but we can't let him go, obviously, until you break. They're dangling his father as well. That's a bit more
it's a
stick.
nice reminder of letting him know that, hey, we also have your father, and if you don't do what we say, and we can hurt him too.
It's funny, so much of what he's saying, not that it's super veiled in the sense that I don't think he necessarily tries to justify too much that Earth is in the right and that his superiors are right about anything. It's more just, this is what they want and I worked for them and this is the result that I'm going for. But it is kind of interesting that he tries to, point out flaws in all of Sheridan's logic. Oh, you were influenced and then you did this, and you took a Minbari into your bed, and then all of a sudden you're doing all these things. And obviously that's kind of really mushing up the details to make it sound far worse than what the actual sequence of events were. It's leaving out so much context. But I think it's interesting that you've got him trying to do all this, but all these little tactics just remind you over and over again who the villains are in this scene. Even if Sheridan's, almost broken, if he's being tempted to be broken, to give up, there's all these little things just to remind you. And, he has those little defiant moments, when he asks him a question just as he's done eating the sandwich. Instead of answering the question, I think maybe when he's asking about Ivanova, if that's who his second command still is, because that was his second in command when it was an Earth station, but is she still the second in command when there are this, free... And I'm like... She's kind of broadcasting all over the galaxy. I mean, you've probably seen the broadcast. It's pretty safe to say she's involved. But he just kind of straightens up, rams the last bit of the sandwich in his mouth, and goes, so good, but this Mustard's a bit weak for my taste. Just just these little moments of defiance. And of course, there is a little trick there where the sandwich was poisoned, not fatally, because they don't want him dead. Because he technically never lied. He just said it wouldn't kill him. And he also then said that he purposely conditioned his body to be okay with this so that he could eat it, and
yeah.
Which again, it ties into the theme. He takes a bite of the sandwich and it looks, oh, that must be safe because he just took a bite. But the truth is different from the perception. So,
right, just another tactic of thinking that you're going to get something easy. Like, if I just do this, I can get something I want. But the thing that they give you is actually poison, and it's going to make you throw up all the sandwich that you ate and be up all night probably. After being up all night with a light in his face, strapped to a chair.
Well, the first time he leaves him, he doesn't leave him in the chair, but every other time after that, he leaves him strapped to this metal chair, and I'm like, he has to be so uncomfortable.
Yeah, you can't sleep like that. I mean, I've slept on a bus before. It's no fun. Or even an airplane.
Yeah.
But I think the first time he walks in, Sheridan's in the chair and there's a light like flashing straight into his eyes. So I assume that meant that they had that light on him all night so he couldn't sleep. And then he gives him the sandwich this day, and so the sandwich keeps him up all night and he can't sleep because he's sick. And then the next time they leave him in a room with a loud, repetitive voice transmission over and over again.
I think it is the interrogator's voice. I think it's him that's on the recording. Yeah.
It's just a recording that just goes over and over again. It's looped and it's incredibly loud so that he can't sleep. You will comply.
You will do what we say. You will give in. Blah, blah, blah. Things like that, yeah.
It's supposed to be subliminal, but also like they're still preventing him from sleeping.
Nothing subliminal about it. It's pretty straight.
Well, you know what I mean? Like it's going to be embedded into his mind so that for later on, perhaps. Yeah. I don't know. Maybe it's just a thing that I've seen in other shows or something where I'm like, oh, that'll be a subliminal message later on or something. It'll come back up.
Yeah, the only thing I'd point out there is that the first time he comes in, he's not in the chair. I know that for sure because that's when he has the whole conversation with them about explaining the collar and like because he walks towards him and he gets shocked. And then he has to get up because he's on the floor again when he comes in after the sandwich because he goes to give him the water and he's on the floor sort of resisting and he's like, no, look, I'm telling you this water's safe, so drink it. And then he's like, please take a seat, you're feeling better. But then when he sits down, the straps still come in and he's like, what the hell, like why do I need these? And he's like, it's for your protection. So but yeah, I will say this: when they wheeled him into an identical stretcher, I did love that the stretcher turned into the exact same table that the other interrogator used. Like it just folds down and it's the exact same thing. I like that little detail. But I will say, when they wheeled him in and it's clearly the exact same room, even from a set perspective, they've clearly just went into the same room. I was like, what? I get that they're meant to be pretty much identical, but I would have appreciated a slightly different shape just to sell the idea that it's like a different room down the hall. Like it just
that's not the same set.
I can just feel them making a U-turn.
Even if it was like a mirrored version of it or something.
Yeah. Just flip it. Yeah, just so that it's like, oh, this is like okay, the same layout but on the other side of the floor. So it looks, It's just because I've seen lots of TV shows do this trick to save money where they'll crack a joke. Oh, the headquarters in the other cities. The exact same headquarters. The Flash did it with a coffee shop. Oh, every Jitters is the exact same. Yeah, because that's how franchises work. Every McDonald's you go into has the exact same layout. Piss off. Anyway, it's a minor thing. Whatever. It's a fairly plain room. Don't get me wrong. So I mean, like, it's not that much of a stretch. But I could sense it. I could sense this is the same set. You just walked out of the same set.
Right. But I get the idea that they were trying to portray.
Yeah, no, I get it. It's like
he feels trapped.
Repetitive hell. There's this moment where this new guy comes in and starts saying the exact same things, and that's how the episode ends. And Sheridan's like, "Oh shit," and at one point in the episode he says, "Oh, there'll be no last minute, savior. There'll be no." And obviously, I do expect eventually there is going to be some rescue of some kind, whoever it may be. But we theoried Garibaldi as a sort of act of redemption because he's going to be motivated as shit to do something. Like he is.
Yeah, I assume so. I know Bester sort of let him go last episode, but I wonder if anybody else is watching him. So we'll see.
Possibly. Well, I don't know if Bester cares about what EarthGov is doing though, because obviously the end goal is for Psycho and the telepaths to, take control. So
yeah,
I don't know if he's watching for the sake of, does he give a shit about what they're doing with Sheridan? I don't know.
Yeah, maybe.
It's a credit to the episode as well that there is so many little things to discuss in the mannerisms and the questioning, how it ties thematically into everything, because you could be forgiven for thinking that an episode set in one room might have less to talk about because we're not jumping around different characters, we're not jumping around different plot lines. But I love when shows do things like this because it's kind of a challenge to tell a complete story, and you've only got dialogue effectively between two characters to do everything, to build the intrigue, to sort of have payoff, set up things in the early parts of the dialogue thematically with some of the questions that he's prodding him with, or the lesson that he's trying to teach with the sandwich and the lights about what time of day it is, and how that spins into, oh, you're going to lie for us, you're going to accept this truth because this truth is going to make your life better, like the sandwich made your life, until it didn't because it was poisoned, but that lesson, that same idea, and because this does tie so well into the themes of the themes of the season, I should say, it doesn't just feel like what it is on the surface either. It obviously is Sheridan imprisoned and interrogated, and I'm trying to break him down, but because all these themes have been so well set up throughout the season, it felt like a sparring match with the ideologies that have been set up over the course of the season, and it made it feel like a much bigger conversation because of that. It didn't just feel like, oh yeah, he is interrogating him and stuff, but these ideas they're talking about are so ingrained into the show at this point that it felt like finally people are debating it. We've been talking, we've had the propaganda, we've had various themes of illusion and the reality creeping in throughout the season, but this is finally two people debating it and fighting about it. Even if it is a little passive-aggressive and under the surface and it's not necessarily been spoken out loud the whole time, they're finally kind of clashing over that very, very topic. So it feels bigger as a result of that. It has kind of an important episode feel because of it, I think.
Yeah, and the episode is paced really well, too. I watched it twice, and in the last few days, and both times it's like, oh, it's over already. I don't know, it just goes by super fast.
Yeah, it doesn't drag at all. Because by the time you get to the end of the sandwich, scene, if you will, you're already a third of the episode, give or take. It takes us to each scene, like a good play, unravels what it's doing in a dialogue at a nice pace, and because it's always so interesting, you're never sitting there going, oh, they're killing time or they're filling time, It doesn't feel like that, and there's no reason to suspect why it would. It's never given us a reason to think it would, but
yeah, I mean, it's just a very defeating episode to watch our hero go through. Even the end when the next interrogator comes in, and his realization that he's going to have to keep going through this over and over again, and no one's going to show him any kind of mercy or humanity because they're all just playing a role. It's a very upsetting episode to sit through, honestly.
It kind of is. On a personal note, I love it.
Yeah, I think it's just set up for, perhaps Sheridan does crack in the next episode, and we'll see him give an apology or something on. And maybe that's why we need to see that. We need to see this so that we know how he got there. Maybe, I would believe it if he does have to crack.
Maybe. Right now, if I was to guess, I'm going to say he's not going to do that. But well,
he is our hero, so I'm hopefully someone comes and rescues him first.
But I love
it would make him more sympathetic to Garibaldi also if he does crack and Garibaldi saves him after.
Oh yeah, that's good thematic point actually. But I love it because I love my main I love my hero going through this shit. I love them being tortured, right? Buffy was never better than when Buffy was miserable, because when the hero is pushed and tested and shoved, but their will doesn't break, that's what's inspiring to me. It's not when things are going well, it's when they go through the worst shit possible, and then it's uplifting when they finally, win or make it through in the end. You have to go through this. And I think what's so great about this is that this is so personal, and the danger that he's in, and the way they're like targeting him now, and the personal hell that he's going through. This is like, I think finally, between this and what Garibaldi just went through in the last episode, I think what they've done here after the Shadow War is they've spent some time building it, but we're at a point now where the stakes aren't bigger in a like, you know, grand scope way, they're bigger in a personal way. Like, this actually feels darker in some ways to any of the Shadow War stuff because of what the characters are actually going through personally now. Obviously, Londo and Jakar went through some really bad shit in the war, but these characters are going through much worse stuff now than they ever did during the war, and that's what's making it feel like it's a bigger deal now at this point.
Well, it feels... It's more difficult because there's so much more betrayal involved, you know, like when you're fighting this big enemy that looks different, that is so ancient, is ancient evil in a way, you know. It's like we know who the bad guys are, but like when it's your own people, like your own, we're supposed to be beyond all this, and we're still fighting the same wars, and the tactics are getting, you know, more and more personal and cruel, then it is worse. It is worse what they're going through.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's worse, like the enemy is worse also.
Yeah, it feels more personal, but the funny thing is, now we're talking about it, like I'm thinking back, and you know, this is kind of the same shit that was being pulled by the Vorlons and the Shadows. They were manipulating what was true and what the real fight was. They were using people as pawns, and the sad part is that even with them gone, like, it just means that, you know, parts of humanity and parts of the other species that are in the galaxy are starting to use those. The telepaths are using those tactics. The governments are using those tactics. It's transfer, and I think that's what almost enriches the Shadow War in retrospect, as well as enriches this going forward, is that even those themes kind of go back into that, and the idea is that even though this was, you know, it's fancy aliens with these big suits and these shadows that kind of like had the Predator, like, you know, visibility cloaking look to them and stuff, even though those were fantastical things, the core elements of what they were doing is still what's happening with these other characters now. And it's very human, it's very raw, and, you know, it's just, you know, it's the old thing is that it doesn't matter how fantastic your characters are, the raw, like, emotion of the story should still be completely true and completely real. You know, it's like there's a famous quote, I can't remember what producer or writer it was that said it about Superman, but, you know, if Superman's got a family visiting from, you know, the Phantom Zone, it doesn't matter that he's Superman and they've all got superpowers. It's still just a story about family visiting, right? And those parts can still be true even with all the other stuff added on top. You just do it through some allegories, you do it through some other things, but you use that to enhance the key things you're telling. And Babylon 5's themes, especially, the specific themes we've been talking about this season obviously have been really heavy this season, but they've always been kind of there. They've always been part of the overall tapestry, if you will. To get really pretentious and use a pretentious word, tapestry.
It's a good word. Good Picard episode too.
I don't think I've gotten to tapestry. What? How do you keep, like, I've got less than 2 seasons left. How is it always ones that I've not seen yet?
I don't know.
You never say, oh, you remember that episode from season 2 that you saw? You never say that.
No, never. Gotta catch up.
Oh dear. So yeah, all really good stuff. You know, I like how it ramped up. I did enjoy that. Just a little filmmaking thing here. I enjoyed that the shots on the interrogator got tighter. Typically, the more the episode went on, it was mostly medium shots at the start of the episode, but then by the time it's the final thing where he's trying to get him to sign this statement, and eventually, Sheridan sees a vision of Delenn standing behind him, and he ultimately spits on it and says no. But when he's trying to do all these convincing things, he's talking about him being unexpendable, at least for now. But even he's not even he's expendable, the interrogator. All of that it's all these tight close-ups. It's all these tight close-ups at that point. So it does this thing where it gets more intense, like just in the camera work as it goes on.
It seemed to either drop this or it was intentionally changed just so we can question what the truth is. But like the interrogator did say, like, if you get within 2 feet of me, like, you'll get shocked. But but the interrogator gets right up in his face all the time. So I don't know.
Yeah, I like, do you know what? This is the sort of thing. As soon as he said that rule, I'm like, I'm sure this is something people nitpick over because it's probably not going to be adhered to. But I've got a simple thing to explain it. It only works if Sheridan's the one that moves towards him. The interrogator's allowed to move towards him as much as he wants.
Okay.
I don't know. I don't care.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. It just seems like it's something that was dropped. That's all.
You know, maybe he turned it off because he wanted to have a personal. Because I mean, at this point he's strapped to the chair anyway.
Maybe.
So he turned it off because he wanted to get in close.
Maybe it's all a lie just so he can question what the truth is.
Well, it's not a complete lie because he does shock him at the start.
He does.
That starts him a couple of times. So maybe just presses a button to shock him. Maybe just lies.
The rule was a lie.
Yeah, the rule was a lie. Yeah.
Pretty good episode. Tough to watch, but good.
Yeah, I really liked it. It was a very different episode as well. So I enjoyed all the little bits. And I think that's the other thing is
like when they break the mold.
Yeah, I think that's the other thing is when you put them in like a plain room and it's just 2 chairs, a table, and 2 actors, is that it forces you to pay attention to the details because all you have is the details.
Mm-hmm.
And when it's done well, it's very cathartic and very rewarding. So, yeah, good stuff. That is the Sheridan interrogation episode of Babylon 5. So let us know what you thought of this one in the comments below. You can like, subscribe, ding the bell for notifications, all that stuff. Get us on the Twitters at mail_fuzz for channel updates. And if you want to support the show, you can do that where, Tara?
That would be patreon.com/MildFuzzTV, where you can donate as little as $1 per month and get a bunch of bonus material for other shows we do. And if you donate $5 per month, you'll get access to these Babylon 5 reviews 6 days early. So head on over, check that out. Thank you.
Yeah, okay. Well, there you go. Thank you once again for watching or listening. We always appreciate it. Keep watching Babylon 5. Just don't give up the home world.